buddy, your set does not matter.
Don't overthink your set. It will continue to change and develop as you do.
One of the coolest things as well is that
Your set, try as much as possible to include elements and include colors that reflect yourself and your brand.
there is one thing that is the most crucial element to change the look of your podcast, and that is welcome, legends, to Podcast Marketing Secrets,
Where we share all of the tactics and strategies from the #1 podcasting agency.
on how to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful high-converting podcast.
Let's take your business and content to the next level.
Welcome back to another episode of Podcast Marketing Secret, you podcasting savages. I'm Nelson.
And I am Kal. Why am I putting on an American accent?
Yeah, I don't know why. What was that? Welcome back to another episode. Today, we're talking about one of our most frequently asked questions, which is my set, the podcast set. How important is this? What things to keep in mind? So Kal is actually one of our set designers here at Vibez HQ.
As you can tell, I wear many hats.
Absolutely. So, Kal, what are some things that are important to keep in mind for a podcast set?
I'll be really honest with you. If I'm going, nothing in particular to do with your set, I wouldn't say is that important. Firstly, okay? What's important is your content. Let's get this straight on every single thing that we're going to be talking about. Social media optimization, the strategy is important, but the name of the podcast, we'll dive into that as well. But these are superficial things, and what matters most is the content. But definitely there are things that we want to be considering when we're looking to create for you the perfect vibe for your set, okay? So I'll start there with the vibe. Basically, your set should be a reflection of who you or your brand are, right? So that comes down to your branding, colors, the feel of it as well. So what I mean in terms of feel is for the Vibez Creative brand, if we're looking at this set here, it's a bit moody, it's a bit mysterious, right? We've got some softness with the curtains here, but it's black, it's white. There's, it is serious in that sense as well. And so the way that we've been able to capture that with the set is through the colors, through the woods that we've added in here, and the lighting as well. Probably, Nelson, you can speak a little bit more about the lighting. But I guess my first tip with relation to your set design would be try as much as possible to include elements and include colors that reflect yourself and your brand as well.
Absolutely. You nailed it with that. And like you said, this is an important reminder. Your set is not as important as you think. You will not believe how many people have come to a strategy call with us and they said, I've been wanting to start a podcast for such a long time. And I asked them instantly, why haven't you done it? Oh, I'm still waiting. The set is about to be built. It's in the process. We will have it soon. And he's like, buddy, your set does not matter. You can grow exponentially and get incredible results regardless of what's in your background. Absolutely doesn't matter. Now, does having a great, beautiful, aesthetic set helps? Of course it does. It helps you stand out in your market on top of everything that Kal just mentioned. It is really a reflection of you and your brand and your business in itself. So yes, you do want to try to keep it in alignment with who you are and all your branding guidelines. There's certain elements that you can add to it as well that will add a little bit of touch of your personality. In this case, we went for a chessboard prop because I'm heavily into chess and I deeply believe that, chess is... Why are you laughing?
Because I know the boys are going to cut it in as B-roll.
Yeah, and I deeply believe that chess is basically one of the greatest representations of life in itself. So that's why we have a chessboard in here. We went for a bit of a different as well tabletop for the chessboard. We just want to create something that is a bit different. Now, there is one thing that is probably the most crucial element to change the look of your podcast.
Is it lighting?
And that is the lighting. That is correct. Yeah.
Talk to us, jam out, geek out on lighting.
Yeah, in this case, we're using what we call essentially practical lighting as well as some background lighting. So in this specific case scenario, this light, the whole purpose of this lighting in here is just to make the scene look a little bit more interesting. It is reflecting a little bit of light off me as well as Kal. This helps us create a little bit of separation between the background and give the feel of depth so that the image in itself, when you guys are watching it right now from your phone or your computer or your screen, it doesn't look too flat. There is a little bit of 3D aspect to the feel of the podcast in itself. Like you can sense that there is some depth between us and the background. That's one of the lighting elements that we have today in here, as well as our key light, which is our main source of lighting for this specific podcast setup. It's just one NAND light. If you're curious about the model of the lights, this is all NAND light. That's a NAND light Forza 300, and these are NAND light PavoTube Steady X. To be honest, if you're getting started and you don't know what to get, just look for the light that you can afford. Having a light is completely going to change the look of your podcast. If you've been doing your podcast just off a camera or your phone, or you've been using the lighting of your specific studio, usually you don't want to use the lights of an office space or your house because the temperature of the light and that light in itself is not designed to be used for video. So usually creates problems with the colors and the accuracy as well of the skin, and it just doesn't produce a very aesthetic image in itself.
I was going to ask, what are your thoughts, which I think you just answered anyways, but thoughts on natural lighting?
Natural lighting can be a really powerful source for basically getting your image to look a lot better. The only problem with it is that it's consistently changing. That's why you want to use video lighting specifically, because in this case, we're taking full control of the lighting of our studio, meaning that it's not going to change. It doesn't matter what happens right now, the light will stay always the same. So that's the principle that you should follow for your specific content. Try to be in control of the lighting. Don't try to fight it. Try to control it or block it out and use video lights so you can be in full control of the final result of your content and your podcast. Let's assume right now that you don't have access to professional video lighting and maybe you're very early in your podcasting journey. The next best bet is probably natural light. So what you want to do as well is try to make sure that you study lighting. There is many things to cover when it comes to how to produce a decent image quality. What I can tell you is that usually you want to try to have your light on an angle, because otherwise your image might look way too flat if everything is coming frontal.
And so what you're saying as well, because you want to create shadows on the face, right? And so by flat, you mean it's just all one tone?
Exactly right. So essentially, if you pay attention to this specific set, or even looking at Kal's face right now, we have the key light coming from one side, then we have some shadows on this side of the face, and we also have some fill light coming from the background light. So it really creates this sense of 3D for the image in itself, as well as looking more aesthetic in the final product of your image. So again, if you want us to create more content around how to light your podcast studio and how to create a better image quality for your podcast and your content, just let us know in the comments down below and we can dive way deeper, because that in itself, it's many podcast episodes.
Yeah, the lighting is a deep dive. That's a specialty in itself. And by the way, guys, you probably don't have too much time to be worrying about the lighting for your podcasting set. Luckily for you, we actually recently launched our one-on-one podcast coaching, which does cover the elements of lighting as well as everything else that you need to know from A to Z to build your very own high converting podcast. So if you want to get in touch with us about that, you can check out the links in the show notes below. Now, Nels, anything else that we need to know about sets?
Another important thing to keep in mind for your set of the podcast is that it can change depending on what's the specific format that you're choosing. So if you're looking to just do, let's say, solo episodes, it might be completely different compared to if you're doing as a host and co-host episode, or if you're looking to do interview-based podcasts. As you can see in here, we had to basically have 2 different chairs. You could have sofas, couches. There's many different options for how you set up your studio. It depends as well with how much space you have available. Of course, in here, we have a ton of different space. We create many different sets for ourselves and clients, but your space might be smaller than this. So maybe you have to play as well with your camera settings as well as your lenses, so you can make sure that it fits your specific space available for your studio or your set in itself. Another crucial thing to keep in mind is the sound. Now, when you're in a space compared to this one that is quite big, you want to make sure that you're controlling the sound. And this can be done with different techniques. One of them is carpet. And just like lighting, sound in itself, it's a whole topic. But essentially what you want to keep in mind is that an empty space is going to create reverb. So it's when you hear stuff, repeating itself, which is terrible for the sound. Or when people is listening to you with headphones, they might feel like if the words are repeating in itself because the sound is bouncing for everywhere. So essentially, that's why you want to have a room that essentially has things that are catching that sound and not making it bounce or basically travel repeatedly, so you create that annoying effect of reverb. In this case, we normally have walls that are movable so we can control the space a little bit more. We also utilize sound blankets. You can also get sound panels, extremely affordable to get in places like Amazon. And essentially, you can stick those sound panels on your walls, on the roof, on corners, on walls, and just help you really get in control of that sound. And another important tool that is going to help you produce a really high quality, crispy sound is going to be your microphones and your audio interface. In this case, we're using Rode Pod mics as well as a Rodecaster Pro 2, which basically is top of the line equipment to produce some of the best sound in the game, as well as we do some cleaning and mastering in post-production to achieve the audio that you guys are listening to it right now.
One other thing as well that I might mention is, as we've spoken about in a previous episode, your long form content is going to be also repurposed for your short form. And what that means is that the aspect ratios are going to be different. So if you're putting up your horizontal video on YouTube, naturally you're going to be shooting much wider than when you're actually doing your reel. So if you were to picture this, and for our listeners, I'll try to describe this, we're talking the horizontal view on YouTube versus the way it gets cut down into a real size on the social media platforms. So if you've gone and spent a lot of time, effort, and energy in terms of positioning items that are only going to be seen in that horizontal view, I would just be mindful of that, knowing that those things are nice, but they're probably going to be cut out as well in your short form pieces of content. So that's just another thing to mention. Nelson also touched on earlier the fact that people are always saying, oh yeah, I've just got to get my set together, blah, blah, blah. Don't let that be the reason why you do not start your podcast. As we emphasized at the start, these things are not the most important part of the podcasting strategy.
They're nice to have, but they're not crucial in order for you to grow a successful podcast.
Yeah. So if we were to summarize everything that we're saying here today in terms of your set, try to align it with your brand, align it to your personal vibe, include certain elements that represent you or reflect you and the brand. Consider your lighting for the space, consider the objects within your space, particularly related to sound. And the other thing I might just mention as well is you don't need an expensive set. You'll be very surprised the production value that you can come up with, either a good camera, some lighting changes, or even just utilizing a different space that you might have available that you might not have considered previously as well. So I guess in essence, what we're saying is don't overthink your set. It will continue to change and develop as you do as a podcaster as well, and your environment and everything else going on in there. So don't overthink it. Put something together, get started, and optimize from there. That's something that we are really strong believers in.
And just remember that one of the coolest things as well of having an audience that is following through your podcast for a long time is that they get to see the evolution of you as a podcaster, as a content creator, as a brand, but as well they get to see the evolution of your set. So don't wait for the perfect set. It takes time to build something that you're going to love. Just get started as quickly as possible. Start creating some momentum, take some action, start producing with whatever you have at hand, following all the principles that we just gave you. Don't overcomplicate it. Just be optimizing the content and the set in itself as you continue to grow your podcast, and even involve the audience as you're going, hey guys, we added a new prop for the set. There's nothing cooler than feeling that you are even a part of the evolution of your set. If you have any questions related to your podcast set, drop it in the comments down below and we'll make sure to create more content answering those specific questions. Where can they find us, Kal?
Well, before we do that, send us some photos of your sets. We'd love to see them as well. And if you want any feedback on them, just swing them through to us on IG. And you can find us at Vibez Creative on all of our social media platforms. If you are loving this content, the best way you can support the podcast is to give us a 5-star review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Subscribe to us on YouTube, and we will see you guys on the next episode.
Good vibes.
Thank you for joining us on Podcast Marketing Secrets. If you found value in this episode, the best way you can support us in continuing to deliver this content to you is by giving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Now, if you're keen to connect with us, we are at Vibez Creative on all your other social media platforms. Please send us your questions, engage with us, let us know what you want to hear about next on the podcast, and we'll be sure to create content around that.
And if you're interested in partnering with us for the highest level of support for you to be able to launch, grow, manage, and monetize a successful podcast for your business or your personal brand, we offer different levels of support, starting from our services, one-on-one coaching, as well as our completely done-for-you system. So if you're interested in finding out more, book a call with our team down in the description below.